Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Drake C. Toll on to chat a little bit about some complaining, some whining that's going on in our video today presented by BetUS. Drake, it wasn't enough just to absolutely get dominated by Notre Dame. Kirby Smart took to the podium after the game and fired some shots towards the Big 12, fired some shots at the Big 12 and the rest of college football maybe in general. What are your thoughts? And let's talk about what Kirby's complaints are.
TJ, you and I have talked about it. The SEC is in a state of disbelief right now with where college football is sitting. And it's not just Paul Feinbaum. It's not just ESPN. It's also the coaches like Lane Kiffin who come to the podium, or the former coaches like Nick Saban who come to the microphone and say, well, the SEC is the best for this reason or that reason. And Kirby Smart, postgame, after losing the Sugar Bowl to Notre Dame, was asked if there was a disadvantage to having a bye in the playoffs and where the 1 to 4 seeds were. And by the way, currently all 1 to 4 seeds are out. None of them made it to the final 4 of the college football playoff, or only one of them, I should say. And 2 of those teams, he says, no, all 4 were out. He says 2 of those teams in that top 4 were better than the other teams, to be honest with you. But I'm not here to complain about anything. And it's my favorite trope from SEC coaches. Hey, I'm not here to complain. I just want to get out in front of everybody else. I'm not complaining. And then they complain. Or they do a really good job of complaining and then saying, but I'm not complaining. That's exactly what you're doing. You're fighting for what? You're saying that 2 of those 4 teams were in a different ball game, a different league than the others. And that's not true. Arizona State went to double overtime with Texas, and 2, targeting and then a touchdown that was possibly dropped. 2 calls don't go their way that completely. One of them was the last play of the game where Texas scores to tie it up on 4th and 13, and the kid might not have caught the ball, and it should have been reviewed, and it wasn't. And that's one example where Texas could have very well lost. So what are you telling me that there's a gap between 2 of the teams compared to another 2? And then Boise State, watching Ashton Genty, competitive as all get out against the Penn State squad that took a possible national championship team down to the wire. Boise State proved it deserved to be there. What did Georgia do? They got their doors blown off by Notre Dame, the same Notre Dame team that pregame it was, Alabama killed Notre Dame. They're always fraudulent. We'll find a way to beat them. Their strength of schedule is 44th in the country. Georgia's strength of schedule is 1. How do you come to the podium, complain about the Big 12, complain about the Group of 5, say that there were 2 teams that were in a different league, and think that that's okay after you just lost to Notre Dame, after you just got stomped, but if you couldn't move the ball again, your big physical offensive line, your run game, nothing. I don't understand who gave these guys, the SEC, a free pass to just say that they're better even when they lose. That is stunning. The lack of self-awareness from that conference, commissioner down, is stunning.
Yeah, the idea of winning hypothetical games, no stranger to the SEC. It is strange, though, after you lose a on-the-field game to then bring up more hypotheticals and say, but if this, we would be maybe in a different spot. They had every advantage. They won the SEC. They were the 2 seed. They got the bye. They didn't have to have the wear and tear. They got more time for their backup quarterback, who actually didn't play very bad. Like, it wasn't his fault they lost. They actually got more time for him to prepare. And like you just said, it starts from the top down. Who was the most responsible for setting up the playoff format the way that it is? It was the Big Ten and the SEC commissioners. It's the ones who control all of the power here in our sport. And then what's the first thing they do when it doesn't benefit them to the absolute T? They start complaining about the format. And
whoa, TJ, they're not complaining. I just want to be very clear here. These aren't complaints, right? I just want to be very clear. They're just voicing their opinions.
And we mentioned this in another segment, but this idea of we relish being the underdog. How do you relish being the underdog and then complain about these other teams weren't as good as us when you lose by double digits? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Right, we're the underdog. We really want to tout the fact we're the underdog. Also, nobody else is as good. Nobody else is as good, and I get it. TJ, there are legit gripes about the college football playoff format and how it's set up. I believe. And what do we just see? The schools that didn't get buys are in the national championship. They're in the Final Four. They're the ones that are continuing through the college football playoff. I would have loved for an Arizona State to get a crack at, had they been the 12 seed, had they been an 11 seed, a 9 seed, an 8 seed, cool. Well, I'm fine with we start reseeding and trying to figure out, okay, on paper, who are the better team. That's great. Boise State, because I do believe Boise State shouldn't have been above Arizona State based on resumes. Ashton Genty's running against Nevada.
I'll get right back to chatting with Drake, but first, I do want to tell you about our friends over at BetUS. Make sure you're using our code YouTube150 for a 150% sign up bonus all the way through the NFL playoffs. We've got March Madness coming up here in a couple of months. Whatever you're betting on, make sure you're betting with BetUS. YouTube 150 gets you 150% on your first bonus, 125% on your next two, all of that up to $2,000. Make sure BetUS is who you're betting with today.
All that to be said, that's a legitimate gripe about the format is, hey, how do we make sure it's set up fairly? And ultimately, the Big 12 even can get more opportunities, like a 10-2 BYU that killed Colorado. They should have gotten a shot, beating SMU straight up to compete or be in the conversation of the college football playoff, and they weren't. Those are gripes that I think are legitimate. But to come to the podium and be like, yeah, well, two of those teams were in a different league than the other two. You just lost Notre Dame. And maybe you can make a case that a warm-up game helped you. I mean, you look at the NFL wild card and then bye weeks, and maybe there I could give you some solace. But to just complain about complaining, just to lose and be like, you know what? We're the underdog. The SEC's the underdog, but also we are way better than Arizona State. We are way better than Boise State. That just doesn't, especially when all four of those top four have now lost, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
This is the first year since 2000 that the SEC didn't have a team with 0 losses, 1 loss, or 2 losses. Obviously, their top teams all with 3 losses or more for the first time again since 2000, when the SEC's top team, Florida, went 10-3. It's like everybody, it's that meme where everybody in the party knows something, but the guy in the corner says something out really loud and everybody else just keeps kind of partying. Yep. It's like everybody else can see it except for the people that it's happening to. The SEC somehow, maybe blinders on, maybe just foolish pride. I don't know what the answer is, but everyone else can see it. Those in the room have no clue.
No. And with Fox, man, they do a pretty good job. I want to give them credit on their side of Big Noon will go to Colorado, and then they'll go to Michigan State, and then Big Noon will go to Kansas State. And you're like, you know what? Good for you guys. Not just picking the school with the most money every weekend, but let's go to the Big 12. Obviously, they're going to camp out a lot in the Big 10, and let's avoid the SEC. They've got plenty of exposure from other outlets, and if you turn on ESPN, it's just SEC propaganda, because again, they have doled out so much money for a product that is not delivering the way they wanted it to. The second they got to this season, no more CBS, Vern Lundquist, these legendary games. That's all moved to ESPN and Joe Tessitore at 3:30, and no one really cared the way that we thought they would. And ESPN, again, they signed the big contract with the NBA, and then no one really cares at all, actually, when NBA games come on. That has historically low viewership. So as much as that propaganda machine, ESPN wants to continue to tout Kirby Smart and Paul Feinbaum and Nick Saban, that's great. I'll watch Locked On. I'll watch College Football Addiction. I'll watch Fox, where they're talking about every other school out there. And like you said, the SEC standing in the corner, they all know I'm the best. And the guys that are dancing are going, who's that guy in the corner? As we're all having our own fun time with college football, they just want to complain. And then kind of like spin their gripe. Like, oh, no, we're complaining because we're the underdog, but also we're complaining because we're the best. That can't happen. I wish that they had some sort of logic.
Yeah, I will say they do a good job from top down doing this, right? It doesn't matter if you're
to the commissioner, the commissioner.
From the commissioner down to the guy that is apparently DMing Sidney Thomas on the side. They all, maybe if you weren't doing that, you could beat Florida on the road and not pee down your leg. But yeah, from the top down, they all get the company memo. They all get the company line. And so if there's one thing you got to get my hat off for, it is the congruity. It is the way that they all tout that company line.
Yeah, they do. They for sure do. And it's funny. It's like an SNL skit at this point. They want attention, and they're all so good at being right down the middle. And I feel bad for like a Sam Pittman who's just drinking a cold beer in the corner. He's just like, I don't want anything. I don't want to do with any of it. I just don't want to get fired, please. And even a Shane Beamer. You listen to Beamer, he's got some pretty good press conferences. He's a guy that seems to play it level-headed, who grew up with a big ACC, Virginia Tech background. And so he plays it pretty even keel. There are some coaches who do it right in the SEC, but guess what? Those guys don't get a lot of attention. We don't talk about Sam Pittman we don't talk about Shane Beamer as much as we probably should for being good people or good coaches. We talk about Kiffin and Kirby Smart and Nick Saban and the guys that are going to carry that machine until they leave their respective schools, and always talk about how I love the clip of Kiffin saying it's just different here, and the scores start popping up from all the bowl games this year. Sure, it's different. It just means more losses.
Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they get more of your work?
At Locked On Big 12 or at Drake C. Toll on Twitter and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Appreciate Drake C. Toll for joining me. Locked On Big 12. Make sure you go check out his content. We'll link it all down in the description. Appreciate BetUS for their support as well. If you felt any type of way about this content, you loved it, hated it, couldn't stand it, or want more, make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of college football addiction.